The grand palace of the Veyron Empire stood like a mountain of silver stone, shining under the glow of 3 suns. For centuries it had been the heart of authority in the galaxy, a place where leaders from many species gathered to discuss peace and war. That day, however, the halls of the palace did not carry songs of diplomacy. They carried echoes of fear. Princess Alira, only daughter of Emperor Veyron, sat on the throne built for her father. The air around her seemed alive with sharp tension. Her eyes burned with an intensity that made even the armored guards standing at the far corners avoid her gaze. Alira was no ordinary royal. Her blood carried the gift of mind force, an ancient psychic energy that allowed her to command thoughts, bend wills, and strike terror without lifting a blade. When she was calm, her presence was like soft fire. When she was angry, her presence was a storm. And now she was a storm no one wanted to face. The news of her father's death had spread across the palace like lightning. He had been assassinated during the fragile talks of ceasefire with the human colonies. No one had seen the attacker clearly, but the result was undeniable. The emperor, who held together an empire that spanned 100 worlds, was gone. In the great hall, alien envoys from different races had gathered, each one wearing formal robes or shining armor. They had come for negotiations, hoping to find a way to end the endless war between the Veyron and the human colonies. But when the emperor's body was carried into the hall, covered in the royal shroud, chaos took over. Alira rose to her feet with a cry that shook the air. She was dressed in dark ceremonial armor, a symbol of her station. Her voice cut through the whispers of the envoys. "You all came here to talk of peace while treachery filled these halls," she said, her tone sharp and commanding. "My father is dead. Murdered during your so-called truce." Her eyes swept across the hall, touching each envoy, each soldier, each attendant. None of them dared to meet her gaze. She felt their fear, and the mind force within her flared, feeding on her grief. She raised her hand, and a wave of invisible pressure pulsed outward. The air grew heavy, and several envoys gasped as if the weight of the atmosphere had doubled. "You will all remember this moment," Alira declared. "I am the heir of the Veyron throne, and I will not forget who cowers before me and who stands with me." The words struck deep into every heart. For a moment no one spoke, but then movement broke the silence. The alien envoys began to retreat. The tall Andari ambassador lowered his eyes and stepped back toward the doors. The scaled Envoss delegate quickly gathered his robes and followed. Soon, one after another, they all began to leave. Their fear of Alira's wrath was greater than their desire for negotiation. The hall that had been full of representatives emptied as though a storm had swept through. Guards avoided her eyes, attendants disappeared into side passages, and soon the vast throne room echoed with the sound of fleeing footsteps. Alira stood alone at the center, her anger burning brighter with every passing second. How dare they flee? How dare they abandon the talks when her father had given his life for peace? To her, their retreat was not fear alone. It was guilt. She imagined each of them carrying hidden daggers, whispering in secret councils, plotting not just against her father but against the entire empire. Her fists clenched. The mind force inside her flared again, and the pillars of the throne hall trembled with the pressure of her emotions. But then she noticed something strange. Amid all the chaos, amid the fleeing envoys and nervous guards, one figure had not moved. He stood near the steps of the throne, still and silent. His armor was plain, not the elegant design of the Veyron but the heavy, practical plating of a human soldier. His helmet was removed, resting under one arm, revealing a scarred face marked by exhaustion. Unlike the others, he did not bow, he did not run, and he did not tremble. Alira turned her gaze upon him, expecting him to falter under her stare as so many others had. Yet he did not. His eyes met hers, and what she saw within them was not fear but sorrow. The silence between them stretched longer than any words. Finally, she spoke. "Why are you still here, human, her voice was colder now, steady but dangerous. Do you not fear me as the others do? The soldier did not move at first. Then he gave a simple answer, his voice quiet yet firm. I have lived through fear already. I lost my family in this war. Fear cannot touch me anymore. Alira narrowed her eyes. She had expected anger, perhaps defiance, but not this calm grief. The soldier's words carried weight, a kind of truth that even her mind force could not bend. For the first time since her father's death, her storm paused. The emptiness of the hall grew heavier. The echoes of fleeing envoys still lingered in her ears, but now all she could focus on was the man who refused to leave. The human soldier, scarred by loss, stood unshaken in front of the most feared heir in the galaxy. Alira did not know whether to strike him down or to demand more of his story. All she knew was that the storm within her had found an unexpected stillness in the presence of this lone figure who dared not run. The palace had become a place of fear, yet in the silence of one human's grief, it felt as though a new path had opened. The throne hall of the Veyron Palace, once filled with voices of many species, now stood nearly empty. The wide floor of polished stone reflected the light of tall crystal lamps, but the light felt cold, as if the hall itself mourned the loss of its emperor. Only broken whispers of fear carried from distant corridors where envoys and guards had rushed to escape the storm of Princess Alira's fury. Yet one man had not fled. Ryan, a human soldier, stood firm near the steps of the throne. His armor bore scratches of battles fought long before this day. The crest of his unit was faded, and one shoulder plate was dented, yet he wore it with quiet dignity. His helmet rested under his arm, showing a face carved by hardship. A scar crossed his left cheek, but it was his eyes that drew Alira's attention. They were not sharp with anger or dim with cowardice. They carried the deep weight of sorrow, the kind of sorrow that does not bend or break but simply remains. Alira's voice echoed in the vast chamber. You still stand before me, human. Tell me why. Do you not understand who I am? Ryan lifted his head, his gaze meeting hers without fear. His voice was calm, though rough with pain. I understand very well who you are. You are Princess Alira, heir of the Empire. Daughter of Emperor Veyron, now fallen. But I do not run from you because I have nothing left to fear. The words struck her strangely. Every envoy, every soldier of other races, had trembled under her presence. They had bowed their heads, begged for her mercy, or fled in silence. Yet here was a human, a soldier of the very colonies her people had fought for decades, speaking to her with steady honesty. Her power stirred within her, the mind force rising like a wave. She reached outward, testing his spirit, as she had done with countless others. Many minds cracked beneath her pressure, showing fear or doubt. But Ryan's mind was different. His grief was like a wall, not of stone but of quiet endurance. It did not fight her, yet it did not fall. Alira's eyes narrowed. You claim you have nothing to fear. Do you not know that I could end you where you stand? Ryan did not flinch. Perhaps you could. But what difference would it make to me? My wife and children were lost when your armies struck at the colony of Arvin. My home was turned to ash. What remains of my life is only duty and memory. End me if you must, but it will change nothing. The hall grew even quieter. His words were not shouted, not bitter, only spoken like truth carved into stone. Alira felt a strange pause within her heart. Her rage had been burning, ready to consume anyone near her, yet the calm weight of his sorrow dimmed the fire. For a moment, she remembered her father. She remembered the warmth of his hand on her shoulder when she was younger, guiding her through the gardens of the palace. She remembered his voice during lessons, steady and strong, always speaking of balance and responsibility. Now that voice was silent, taken from her by treachery. Her grief was sharp and furious, yet the human before her showed a grief that was quiet and heavy. Two different storms, but storms all the same. Alira stepped down from the throne, each movement echoing in the empty chamber. Her armored boots struck the stone floor with measured weight. She stopped before Ryan, close enough to see the lines of exhaustion on his face. Her eyes searched his, trying to find anger or fear. She found neither. "You lost your family in this war," she said slowly. "And still you stand in the heart of the Empire, before the daughter of the one you should call your enemy." Ryan's voice was low but firm. "I lost everything to war, yes. But what I see now is more than enemy or ally. I see a galaxy drowning in grief. You have lost your father. I have lost my family. Maybe different sides, but the pain feels the same." The words hung between them like a bridge neither had expected. Alira felt her chest tighten. She had expected hatred. She had expected a soldier who would spit curses at her name. Instead, she found someone who understood loss, though from another path. For the first time since her father's death, she allowed her power to settle. The storm of her mind force eased, and the trembling of the walls faded. She studied the man before her not as an enemy soldier, but as a figure marked by fate, much like herself. "Why do you remain here when the others have fled?" she asked. Ryan's gaze did not waver. "Because I am tired of running. I have run from war, from fire, from graves. I will not run from grief. If you choose to strike me, then so be it. But I will not turn my back to you as they did." Alira felt a strange respect stir within her. His words were simple, yet their strength was greater than the polished speeches of the envoys who had scattered like dust. She realized something then. Fear was easy to command, but respect was rare. This human, broken by loss, gave her something none of the others had: truth without disguise. She stepped back, her eyes softening though her voice remained steady. "You are bold, human. Bold or foolish, I do not yet know. But your presence has stopped my storm, if only for a moment." Ryan gave no answer, only stood firm, his helmet still under his arm, his face still calm in sorrow. The silence stretched, not heavy now, but almost balanced. Alira, heir of the throne, and Ryan, soldier of the colonies, stood in quiet recognition of each other's grief. In that vast hall of silver stone, where fear had driven all others away, two figures remained bound not by loyalty, nor by blood, but by shared loss. It was the beginning of something neither had expected. The throne hall was silent, yet the silence did not bring peace. It was the kind of silence that waited for a spark, heavy and tense, ready to break at any moment. Princess Alira stood in front of the human soldier, her eyes fixed on him. The man who called himself Ryan did not tremble, did not bow, and did not run. He stood steady, as if the storm of her presence could not touch him. Alira's chest rose and fell with sharp breaths. Her father's death still burned in her thoughts, and the image of his lifeless body wrapped in the royal shroud would not leave her mind. She wanted to scream, to strike, to tear apart the cowardly envoys who had fled. But instead, she found herself locked in this strange standoff with a single human soldier who refused to fear her. "Do you know what your kind has done?" Alira's voice cut through the air like steel. "Do you know how many worlds have burned because of your colonies? My people bleed because of your kind, and now my father lies dead. And you dare to stand before me with such calm?" Ryan's gaze did not shift. His voice came quiet but strong. "Do you know what your kind has done? Do you know how many families have been broken under your empire's armies? My wife and children were among them. My people bury their dead in ruins left by Veyran fire. And you speak of loss as if it belongs to you alone." The words struck Alira harder than she expected. Her fists clenched, her mind force rising again, pressing outward like a storm tide. The pillars of the hall shook faintly, and the air grew heavier. She wanted to crush him with the weight of her will, to make him kneel as so many others had. But Ryan did not kneel. His grief stood firm against her pressure, not in defiance but in endurance. She could sense it through her power. His sorrow was not sharp like her anger. It was deep, like a river that had carved itself into stone. No matter how hard her storm pushed, the river remained. Alira stepped closer, her eyes blazing. You dare compare your grief to mine? You dare to stand here as if we are equal in pain? Ryan lifted his chin. Grief does not measure itself, princess. Pain is pain. You lost your father. I lost my family. The shape is different, but the weight is the same. Her breath caught in her throat. She had expected hatred from him. She had expected rage. Instead, his words carried no venom, only truth. That truth pressed against her anger, forcing her to see herself in a way she did not want to. For a long moment, the two stood locked in silence, grief meeting grief, fury meeting sorrow. Alira broke the silence first. You speak as though you understand me. But you do not. You could never understand what it means to be heir to an empire, to feel the eyes of 100 worlds upon you, to carry the legacy of a throne now broken. Ryan shook his head slowly. And you could never understand what it means to hold your child in your arms and know you cannot save them. We are not the same, princess, but our grief is still grief. Yours is carved by duty. Mine is carved by love. But it burns all the same. The words cut deeper than any blade. Alira felt her rage tremble, not with weakness but with confusion. She had always believed her pain was unmatched, that no one could mirror the storm within her. Yet here was a human, enemy of her people, speaking with a sorrow that reached across the gulf between them. Her power flared again without warning. The floor beneath them shook, and cracks spread across the polished stone. The air hummed with invisible force, pressing down on Ryan. Dust fell from the high arches of the hall. Still, the human did not move. His knees bent slightly under the pressure, but he stood his ground. His armor groaned under the weight, yet his eyes never left hers. Alira's voice trembled, torn between fury and something else. Why do you not yield? Why do you not beg for mercy like the others? Ryan's answer came steady, though his breath grew heavy under her force. Because mercy cannot bring back the dead. I do not beg, because there is nothing left for me to beg for. If you crush me now, you only silence a man already broken. But if you let me stand, you will see that grief does not belong to you alone. The pressure of her power held a moment longer, then broke like a wave retreating to the sea. Alira stumbled a step back, her chest heaving. She had wanted to break him, to prove her storm stronger than his sorrow. Instead, she found her strength fading against the unshakable weight of his endurance. For the first time since her father's death, tears welled in her eyes. She did not let them fall, but she could not stop the tightness in her throat. Ryan, though still heavy with sorrow, straightened. His voice softened, though it carried the same truth as before. You are angry because you are alone. You believe no one understands. But grief has filled every side of this war. You are not alone in loss, princess. You are only blind to how many share it. Her eyes met his again. She saw no victory in him, no pride, no gloating. Only sorrow, and a strange kind of strength that did not rise from power but from survival. In that moment, Alira felt her storm break against a wall she had never known existed. Not a wall of resistance, but a wall of quiet pain that no power could move. And though she still burned with anger, something inside her shifted. She no longer saw Ryan as just a soldier of the enemy. She saw him as a mirror of her own loss, a mirror she could not ignore. The clash of grief did not end in victory for either side. It ended in silence, where both stood wounded not by weapons, but by truths they could not deny. The storm inside the throne hall had ended, though its memory still lingered in the cracks of the stone floor and in the faint trembling of the air. Princess Alira stood near the throne, her breaths heavy but steadying. Her eyes, once burning with uncontrolled fury, now studied the human soldier who had not fled. Ryan stood silent, his helmet still under his arm, his posture worn yet unbroken. The invisible weight she had pressed against him had faded, leaving behind only quiet stillness. His face showed no victory, no pride, only the same sorrow that had carried him from the beginning. Alira's heart was unsettled. She had faced generals who commanded fleets, envoys who spoke with cunning words, and rebels who spat curses at her name. All of them she could bend or break with her will. Yet this single soldier had stopped her storm, not with power or skill, but with grief that refused to bend. The silence stretched between them until Alira finally broke it. "You should have fallen. No one has ever stood so firm against me before." Ryan shook his head slightly. His voice came calm and steady. "I did not stand to defy you, princess. I stood because I could not fall any further. When you lose everything, you learn that no storm can move you more than grief already has." The words settled deep within her. For the first time, Alira felt her anger weaken, replaced by a feeling she rarely allowed: curiosity. She stepped closer, her armor whispering against the stone floor. Her eyes studied him, searching for weakness, for deception. She found none. "You speak as though sorrow is your shield," she said. "Yet sorrow is weakness. It breaks empires. It breaks rulers. It breaks hearts." Ryan's gaze did not waver. "It can break, yes. But it can also teach. My grief does not make me strong, but it keeps me standing. That is enough." Alira felt her breath catch. She turned away, walking slowly toward the great throne at the end of the hall. The seat stood tall and empty, its silver frame glowing softly in the light of the crystal lamps. She reached out, letting her hand rest upon its arm. It had belonged to her father, the man who had taught her to lead, to balance power with wisdom. Now it was only a memory, a shadow of what once was. "I thought my fury would keep me strong," Alira whispered, almost to herself. "I thought if I let my rage grow, it would protect me from the weight of his loss. But the more I feed it, the more it consumes me." Ryan's voice carried gently across the hall. "Because anger burns without end. It does not protect. It only leaves ashes behind." Her hand tightened on the throne. She wanted to deny his words, to silence him as she had silenced so many before. Yet her heart told her he spoke truth. The storm inside her had not given her peace. It had driven everyone away, leaving her alone in the vast emptiness of the hall. Everyone but this human. Turning back to face him, she asked, "Why do you speak this way to me? I am your enemy. I carry the blood of the empire that destroyed your family. Why would you not strike me with your hatred?" Ryan looked at her with the same calm sorrow. "Because hatred only continues the chain. My family is gone. No vengeance can bring them back. I do not hate you, princess. I only see another life broken by this war, same as mine." His answer struck her deeper than any weapon could. For a moment she had no words. She lowered her gaze, her mind force quiet, her storm gone. The unexpected calm that filled the hall was strange to her. She was used to fear. She was used to obedience. Yet here was calm, shared between two who should have been enemies. It was unsettling, but not unwelcome. After a long pause, Alira spoke again, her tone softer than before. "You are bold, human, to speak to me in such a way. Bold, or perhaps foolish." Ryan gave a faint shake of his head. "Neither. I simply have nothing left to lose, so I choose to speak what is true." Alira studied him carefully. His sorrow was clear, but within it she saw something else: a strength not born of power, but of endurance. He had survived loss, and in that survival, he carried a weight even she could not match. "You are different from the others," she admitted at last. They ran from me. You did not. They bowed to me. You did not. I expected defiance or hatred, but instead you gave me truth. It is rare in this hall to hear truth spoken without fear. Ryan's voice was steady. Fear does not serve me anymore. Truth is all I have left. The calm between them deepened. Alira felt her storm settle, her mind clearer than it had been since her father's death. The presence of this human, instead of igniting her fury, quieted it. She could not explain why, but she sensed that his sorrow gave balance to hers. She stepped down from the throne's platform and stood only a short distance from him once more. For the first time, her eyes softened. You may not believe it, human, but your words have stayed my hand, she said. When all others fled, you remained. When all others trembled, you did not. Perhaps it is not weakness to endure grief, but strength of a kind I have not known. Ryan inclined his head slightly. Perhaps it is both, princess. Weakness and strength are closer than many think. Her lips curved in the faintest shadow of a smile, though sorrow still lay heavy in her heart. Strange. A human soldier teaches me what my own counsel could not. My father would have found that amusing. The silence that followed was no longer heavy with anger, but lighter, carrying an unexpected peace. The storm had passed, and in its place stood two figures bound by loss, yet holding a calm neither had expected. For the first time since her father's death, Alira felt she was not alone. And for the first time since losing his family, Ryan felt that his grief was understood. The throne hall remained empty of envoys and council members, but it no longer felt hollow. In the stillness, a fragile bond had been born, one that neither fury nor fear had created, but grief shared and calmed. It was a beginning neither of them had foreseen. The palace was quiet, but Princess Alira knew silence in the empire was never safety. News of the emperor's death had already begun to spread, not only within the palace walls but across the capital world and into the stars beyond. Whispers carried faster than light, and whispers always grew into storms. Alira stood at the tall windows of the council chamber, looking out over the city that stretched like silver rivers across the planet's surface. Ships moved through the skies in neat patterns, but beneath the order, she could sense unrest. Her father's death had shaken the empire, and fear was opening space for betrayal. Behind her, Ryan stood at the entrance of the chamber. His armor, though battered, caught the glow of the crystal lights. He did not speak, yet his presence was steady. She had dismissed all attendants and guards for the moment, not because she trusted the human more than them, but because she trusted them less. The council will gather soon, Alira said without turning. They will bow and swear loyalty, but I can already hear the plotting in their silence. They do not mourn my father as I do. They see his death as an opening. Ryan's voice came calm and even. Power invites ambition. When a throne is unsteady, every shadow grows teeth. Alira glanced over her shoulder at him. You speak as though you know courts and thrones. I do not, Ryan admitted. But I know men. And I know what war does to ambition. The war between your empire and the colonies has fed more than armies. It has fed those who profit from conflict. They will not stop simply because one man has died. His words stirred something inside her. It was true. For years, the war had carried on without clear victory. Ships destroyed, colonies burned, worlds scarred, yet the conflict always continued. Too many had gained power from its endless cycle. Her father had been one of the few who sought to end it, and now he was gone. Alira stepped away from the window and moved closer to Ryan. Her eyes studied him, still trying to understand the strange strength in his calm. You stand in my palace, human. You belong to the enemy, yet you speak as though you see this empire as clearly as one born within it. Ryan met her gaze. Loss gives clear sight, princess. When you lose everything, you begin to see what truly drives others. Not loyalty. Not honor, but hunger for control. She considered his words in silence. He was not wrong, and she knew it. The council would bow when called, but behind closed doors, they would already be speaking of succession, of alliances, of shifting power. Some would even wonder if her father's death had been no accident but carefully arranged. Alira lowered her voice. I cannot trust them. Not now. Perhaps not ever. If I show weakness, they will divide the empire until nothing remains. Yet if I answer only with fury, I will lose the very balance my father taught me to guard. Ryan asked, what will you do then? The question lingered heavy in the air. Alira's steps echoed as she paced the chamber. Her mind force stirred faintly, not in rage, but in restless thought. She turned back to him with sudden resolve. I will not stand alone, she said. And yet I cannot call upon those who bow with false loyalty. That leaves me with an unexpected choice. Her eyes locked on his. You. Ryan blinked, his face steady but surprised. Me. Yes, Alira said firmly. You are the only one who has not fled, the only one who did not bow in false submission. You have no ties to this empire, no place in its power games. You lost everything to this war, which means no bribe or threat can bind you. That makes you dangerous, but it also makes you trustworthy in a way my own counsel is not. Ryan's jaw tightened. You would trust a human soldier, enemy of your empire, over your own blood and counsel. I would trust the truth I saw in your grief, Alira answered. I would trust the strength that stood against my storm. That is more than I can say for the others. Silence filled the chamber. Ryan stood thoughtful, his scarred face unreadable. At last, he spoke. If I accept this, I do not do it for loyalty to your empire. I have no reason to serve it. But I do want to know why this war never ends. I want to know why my family had to die. If standing with you brings me closer to those answers, then I will walk this path. Alira inclined her head slightly, the closest thing she had offered to respect. Then we share a goal, even if not a loyalty. The truth behind this war has stolen from us both. Together, we may uncover it. Ryan's voice lowered. And if the truth is closer than you think? If the enemy is not across the stars, but seated within your own walls? Her expression darkened. Then I will face it? No matter who it may be. At that moment, the doors of the council chamber opened. Attendants entered, their robes trailing, their faces carefully composed. Behind them, members of the High Council stepped forward, bowing with measured grace. Their eyes shone with respect on the surface, but Alira could sense the shadows beneath. She took her place at the head of the chamber, her presence commanding, her storm hidden for now. Ryan moved to stand slightly behind her, not as a servant, not as a prisoner, but as a silent shadow at her side. His armor was plain compared to the shining robes of the council, yet his presence drew more weight than their polished words. The council began to speak, their voices smooth, their bows deep. They spoke of sorrow, of loyalty, of unity in a time of tragedy. But Alira listened with sharpened senses, hearing the emptiness in their tones. She felt their hidden schemes brushing against the edges of her mind force. She did not show it, but she knew. They were already plotting. They were already dividing. And so, though her face remained calm, she spoke words that shifted the balance. My father is gone, yet the empire stands, she declared. I will honor his memory not with endless war, but with strength that seeks truth. Already whispers spread that his death was no random act, but a design. I will find the hand behind it, and when I do, I will not stand alone. Her words carried across the chamber like a blade wrapped in velvet. The council exchanged glances, some wary, some curious. Ryan stood silent, but his presence at her side was not lost on them. A human soldier, enemy of the empire, standing beside their princess. It unsettled them more than her storm ever could. The dangerous alliance had begun, though none yet knew how far it would reach, or what truths it would uncover. The days after the council meeting passed like shadows creeping across stone. Princess Alira carried herself with calm strength, her storm hidden behind a mask of control, but inside her heart burned with suspicion. She had seen the looks in the eyes of the council. Their words of loyalty had been smooth, yet she had felt the cracks beneath them. The empire her father had built stood tall on the surface, but within its halls, rot had already taken root. Ryan remained by her side. To the attendants and guards, his presence was strange. A human soldier, once an enemy of the empire, now walked the corridors beside the heir of the throne. Some whispered in confusion, others in fear, but none dared to question her choice. Alira knew that his presence unsettled the council even more than her own power. That was part of why she kept him close. One evening, as the twin moons rose over the capital, Alira summoned Ryan to the quiet chambers of her father's library. The room was lined with shelves of crystal tablets, each holding records of treaties, wars, and histories from across the galaxy. The light from the moons poured through the tall windows, casting silver shadows across the floor. "My father kept secrets here," Alira said as she moved among the shelves. "Not secrets to deceive, but secrets too dangerous to speak in council. He believed that knowledge is power, and power must be guarded." Ryan followed her carefully, his eyes scanning the rows of glowing tablets. "What are you hoping to find?" "The truth," Alira answered. "This war between the Empire and the colonies has lasted longer than reason. My father believed there were forces that fed it, forces that did not belong fully to one side or the other. If he was killed during the peace talks, then perhaps those same forces arranged his death." Her fingers brushed across one shelf before she stopped at a tablet marked with her family crest. She lifted it carefully, the crystal glowing at her touch. With a wave of her hand, the tablet projected light into the air, forming lines of text and images. Together, they studied the records. They showed shipments of weapons that had vanished before reaching the front lines, colonies mysteriously supplied with technology beyond their means, and patterns of attacks that did not favor either side but instead prolonged the conflict. Ryan leaned closer, his brow furrowed. "These records show movements from both sides. Human colonies receiving supplies from unknown sources. Veyron fleets redirected without clear orders. Someone wanted this war to continue. Not for victory, but for profit." Alira's jaw tightened. "Yes. Look here." She pointed at a series of names listed as merchants and financiers, stretching across neutral worlds. "These are not soldiers or rulers. These are traders, bankers, and shadow networks. They fed both sides, ensuring neither won nor lost. While soldiers and civilians bled, they grew rich." The truth weighed heavy in the chamber. The war that had stolen Ryan's family, the war that had taken her father from her, was not born only from hatred between humans and Veyron. It had been fed, prolonged, and twisted by those who thrived on endless conflict. Ryan's voice was low but steady. "My family died because someone saw their deaths as part of a business. Not strategy. Not defense. Business." Alira closed the tablet with a sharp motion, the light fading into silence. Her eyes burned with cold fire, not the storm of uncontrolled rage, but the steady flame of resolve. If this is true, then the enemy is not simply across the stars. The enemy is within every hall of power, hiding in shadows, using grief as their coin. She turned to Ryan. "We must move carefully. If the council is tied to these shadows, then every step we take is watched. If they suspect what we know, they will strike before we can act." Ryan nodded. "Then we take their strength from them. Expose their hidden hands. Make their secrets burn in the light." The plan took shape slowly, like stone carved into form. Alira and Ryan began to move in secrecy. At night, They searched her father's hidden records. By day, they listened to the council's words, weighing truth against falsehood. They pieced together a trail of evidence that stretched far beyond the palace walls, reaching into neutral systems, merchant guilds, and private armies. One night, as they studied another tablet, Ryan found a set of coded messages. They spoke of an alliance not of humans or Veyron, but of those who lived between, dealing weapons, fuel, and information. Their goal was clear: keep the war alive, because war meant wealth. Alira felt her fists tighten as she read. So this is why my father died. He was close to ending the war, and that threatened the ones who fed on it. They silenced him before peace could take root. Ryan's voice was heavy with grief. And my family died because someone in a far world counted numbers on a ledger. Their lives were coins in the hands of merchants. The clash of grief that had once stood between them now shaped into shared resolve. Both had lost everything to the same hidden enemy, though through different paths. Both now burned with the same purpose. Alira stepped to the window, her gaze on the stars that shone beyond. If we are to strike at them, we cannot do it with armies alone. Armies are already bound by their lies. We need allies who seek truth, not profit. But to find them, we must reveal enough of the shadows to bring others to our side. Ryan crossed his arms. It will be dangerous. Once they know we are hunting them, they will not wait. They will strike again. Her voice was steady, her eyes unyielding. Let them strike. Let them come. For the first time, I see clearly. This war is not between our peoples. It is between those who suffer and those who profit. And I will not let them win. The unexpected alliance between a princess of the empire and a human soldier had now grown into something larger. It was no longer just survival. It was purpose. That night, as the moons watched from above, Alira and Ryan swore silently to each other that they would uncover every hidden hand, no matter the cost. For the first time since her father's death, Alira did not feel her storm raging uncontrollably. For the first time since his family's death, Ryan felt his grief sharpen into resolve. Together, they had found the truth. But the truth was only the beginning. The storm within the empire had grown louder since the emperor's death. Whispers turned into open doubts. Ships loyal to the throne were intercepted, trade lines slowed, and messages of rebellion began to spread across distant systems. The council acted calm in the palace, but their movements showed another story. They were aligning with those who fed the war. Princess Alira knew she could no longer wait. Every day gave the hidden enemy more ground. The time had come to reveal what she and Ryan had uncovered, even if it meant placing herself in greater danger. On the day of the imperial gathering, the council assembled in the great hall. Pillars of crystal lined the chamber, glowing softly with the light of the twin suns. Nobles and commanders filled the seats, their eyes fixed on the empty throne where her father once ruled. At the center stood Alira, her presence firm though her heart carried both fire and sorrow. Ryan stood at her side, silent but watchful. His armor bore the marks of battle, and his stance was unyielding. To many in the hall, his presence was an insult, a reminder that the heir of the empire stood with a human soldier. Yet Alira had chosen him for that very reason. His presence declared that truth had no borders. When the hall grew silent, Alira stepped forward. Her voice carried clear, strong, and unshaken. My father dreamed of peace. He sought to end the war that has scarred our worlds. For that, he was silenced. Not by enemies beyond, but by traitors who profit from endless blood. A ripple of murmurs swept across the chamber. Some voices called it blasphemy, others demanded proof. Alira raised her hand, and a tablet of crystal appeared in the air, projecting records for all to see. Shipments lost, weapons supplied to both sides, coded messages of shadow alliances. These are the truths my father hid in fear of betrayal, she declared. The war you claim is honor and defense is nothing more than a chain forged by merchants, bankers, and false leaders. They do not seek victory. They seek only to feed their power. My father discovered this and was slain before he could reveal it. The council erupted in shouts. Some voices cried denial, others stammered excuses. Yet Alira's gaze moved across them with piercing calm. She could sense the guilty among them, those who shifted uneasily, their thoughts veiled but their fear leaking through. At her side, Ryan stepped forward. His voice cut through the noise with steady weight. I fought in your war. I lost my family to it. For years I believed it was because of hatred between humans and Veyron. But now I know the truth. My family died because someone in this very hall counted their deaths as gain. Soldiers bled while merchants grew rich. You call this war honor? I call it murder dressed as politics. The hall grew tense. Eyes turned not only to Alira but to Ryan. His words struck harder because they came from the other side of the conflict. A human soldier and the daughter of the Emperor stood together, united by grief and truth. Alira raised her voice once more. I will not let my father's death be forgotten. I will not let my people, or his, be chained by those who profit from their suffering. The war ends now. Not with surrender, not with defeat, but with truth revealed. And I will stand against any who wish to hide it. Her storm stirred faintly, a glow rising around her like silent lightning. It was not uncontrolled fury, but focused resolve. The power that once frightened others now became her shield. One of the elder counselors rose, his face pale. You are blinded by grief, princess. You would bring ruin upon the empire with these dangerous claims. Alira's eyes locked on him. Calmly, she replied, no. It is your greed that brings ruin. And now all can see it. Gasps filled the chamber as the records projected his name among those linked to the shadow merchants. He faltered, his voice breaking. The hall filled with shouts, some in his defense, others in rage. Guards moved uncertainly, caught between loyalty to the council and fear of the princess's storm. Ryan stepped forward, his hand resting on the hilt of his blade but not drawing it. His voice rang steady. If you try to silence her as you silenced her father, you will fail. She is not alone. I stand with her, and so will others who are tired of lies. The chaos grew, yet within it, a spark of change ignited. Nobles who had long doubted the council began to speak in support of Alira. Commanders who had lost soldiers to pointless battles lowered their heads in shame and agreement. The hall that had once bent only to power now bent to truth. The elder counselor, cornered and desperate, attempted to flee, but Alira's storm rose just enough to block his path. Lightning flared across the crystal floor, not striking, but warning. Her voice cut sharp and final. No more running. No more lies. The guards, seeing the proof and feeling the weight of her command, moved at last. The guilty were seized, their cries echoing through the chamber. When silence finally returned, Alira stood tall. Her storm faded, leaving only calm light. She looked across the hall, her voice steady once more. This empire will not fall to shadows. Not while I breathe. The war ends, and with it, the chains that bound us. But I cannot do this alone. I ask you to stand with me, not as servants, but as people who choose truth over greed. The chamber bowed, not in forced loyalty, but in respect. Some still carried doubt, but the spark had been lit. As the gathering ended, Alira walked out of the hall with Ryan beside her. The corridors were quiet, but the air carried a new weight. She had stood against the council, revealed the truth, and taken the first step toward ending the war. Ryan walked in silence until they reached the palace gardens. There, beneath the glow of the twin moons, he finally spoke. You have changed everything tonight. But it will not be easy. The ones who profit from war will not vanish quietly. They will strike again. Alira looked up at the stars, her voice calm but resolute. Then let them strike. They will find us unbroken. Ryan met her gaze. In her eyes, he no longer saw only the royal daughter or the storm that once frightened him. He saw strength born of grief, and resolve that matched his own. For the first time since his family's death, he felt that he was not alone in his fight. She reached out, her hand resting briefly on his arm. You stood when no one else would. I will not forget it. Whatever comes next, we face it together. Ryan gave a single nod. Together. The war was not yet over. The shadows would not rest. But in that moment, under the watch of the moons, an unbroken bond had been forged. A bond that no council, no merchant, no hidden hand could shatter.